So, on behalf of IEG, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you today for this panel discussion. A brief background about this panel discussion. Actually, IEG is currently carrying out a concurrent evaluation of one of the flagship programs of the Ministry of Agriculture, which is called Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. So, under that, we have invited many states and we are seeking their perspective on the RTM writing. And as a part of that, this panel discussion has been organized on the second day of this 3-day workshop. And so, it's only apt that one of the people who is actually who was instrumental in conceiving this RTV was Rajit Singh, is head chair today's session. And it's a bit provocative. But the thing is, the fact is that agricultural growth does not always translate into higher incomes for the farmers. So how do we do that? What are the ways of doing that? Can that ever be done? So this is the thing that we thought will be very topical. And we could not have asked for a better panel. And although it's a bit cliche to say, but this panel doesn't need any introduction at all. We have Professor Ramesh Chand, who is a renowned scholar and presently the member of Niti Aayog, and Professor J.V. Meenakshi from Delhi School of Economics. She is an expert on consumption analysis and nutrition. And Dr. Nitin Desai is co-chairing today's discussion. And Ms. Nirja Adidam is a joint secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture. She is looking after the RKB program. And she will give us the practitioner's perspective of this program. So, with these few words, may I now request the co-chair for today's discussion, Mr. Nitin Desai, to briefly welcome the participants and start the proceedings.
To the name of the Ministry of Agriculture. And therefore it has become a matter which the ministry is now officially and very confidently saying that that is what their concern is. Now, the focus on agriculture in India has been a varied one. For a long time, the main focus came from we have to produce so many grams or so many tons of agricultural output because you need to feed people. The second argument used to be that Bharat is a, Krishi Pradhan, and therefore all the things would go with that. Then there was this idea of agricultural growth and overall GDP growth are very strongly linked, and if you have too much of overall growth with too little of agricultural growth, then you have inflationary problems. So there was a macroeconomic issue to it. Somewhere along the line, this idea that agriculture should be looked at as a subject whose main goal should be to improve agricultural incomes was never really the focus point of the way in which we have looked at the problem or looked at that issue. Of course, there have been sidelines to it. In fact, Krishi Pradhan there says, a majority of our people live there. There's also been the argument that of all the sectors, the sector where a certain amount of growth makes the most impact on poverty is probably agriculture. So the relationship between agriculture and well-being, and the fact that India is still, overwhelmingly an agricultural country, although it is no longer the majority occupation. But somewhere we got this idea that no, enough is enough. One of the clear objectives of agricultural policy should be to make farmers better off, rather than produce more food grain, rather than diversify, rather than keep inflation low. And I think that's really what we are going to discuss today. Because there is, in this context, the other thing, which is one of the first statements of the Prime Minister was that he intended to double farmers' income within a prescribed period. And this obviously is something a lot of people were pretty incredulous about. Now, in many ways, I think Ramesh is the person who's got to sell the idea that this is doable, not just to the press and lay people, but to people in governments, saying that if you do the following, you might actually be able to double incomes. Now, therefore, I'll ask Ramesh to begin. But I would also like the general discussion to ponder on two other points. The first is, does that require new policies, new ways of actually looking at the way governments deal with agriculture? And to give an example, take two very recent things which have happened, both of which are pretty old, but suddenly a lot of people are talking about it nowadays. The first one is, every now and then there is a demand for debt relief. We've just had a spate of elections, and debt write-offs have been promised by various. So debt write-offs can be seen as a way of, well-being of farmers, as a way of doing it. But economists have had views on that matter, which sometimes have supported write-off, but usually they haven't. Where does something like that fit in? The second, if you are really talking about well-being of the farmers, then you are actually looking at agricultural policy just as, it's almost as if an economic policy for the people of a particular sector. And like any sector or any economy, there are issues regarding who pays for things. And Ramesh's co-member of the Niti Aayog raised an issue recently, which is a very old issue actually. Ken Raj, Anand, and all talked about an agricultural income tax, or at least a tax on agricultural incomes. And this has again sort of come out of the closet, so to say. And since that closet sort of opened its doors in Niti Aayog, I'd actually like Ramesh to say a little bit on it. Because if you're thinking mainly about welfare and not on those other goods, this becomes an issue. I won't bother, I won't press Ramesh for any other issue. But Meenakshi is here. The question obviously to Meenakshi's work, anyone who doesn't know Meenakshi, I know Meenakshi best for her work really on nutrition. And the relationship between nutrition and agriculture is one of those old ones. It has nothing to do with the well-being of farmers. It is agriculture as a means to well-being in a somewhat different sense. But Meenakshi has worked on agriculture directly and on several aspects, including agricultural marketing. And I think I'd like her to talk about the idea of farmers' welfare. How important is that to the study of agriculture and the issues that economists have been studying around agriculture? How important is farmers' well-being to that issue? And one of the problems here, of course, is that who is a farmer? Does it include agricultural laborers? If it doesn't, then you're actually leaving off almost half of the agricultural population and concentrating on the upper half. So the issues which come around that type of things is what I'd actually request Meenakshi to have a little thought of. Mirja Adidam, Joint Secretary running RKVY. RKVY was an RKVY was an attempt to decentralize in a system in which there were too many centrally sponsored schemes. The goal then was that we'll get rid of these centrally sponsored schemes over time. There will be this large RKVY whose main goal will be to incentivize states to do three things. Number one, to do district-wise planning, come up with their own thing, and RKVY will finance them. Number two, put in their own money into their own projects. And how much money they would get from RKVY would depend on what commitment they showed in terms of the amount of financing they were willing to do to agriculture. And the last thing about RKVY was that it was entirely decentralized, so that all the decision making was done by the state. There was simply a little bit of monitoring done, say, by the IG, and there was a central group which sat with the states and said, okay, these are the projects to be. I've forgotten the name of what that. SLS. But the goal was, with the one goal we didn't take off was making district plans, making state plans, not for RKVY schemes, but for state agriculture as a whole. Goal of RKVY was not another scheme where you do these under this. It was you would structurally change agriculture, and the center would structurally recognize that the best agricultural schemes or projects come from the states themselves, and the states in turn would over time realize that much of that would happen even better if it was decentralized down to a lower level. So what I would ask Mirja to actually tell us a little bit about is where do the schemes stand? And in the context of today's discussion, have we added in this, in any significant sense, the idea of farmers' well-being? With the RKVY itself, didn't have farmers' well-being as an objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Desai and Professor Sen, fellow panelists and distinguished participants. In fact, what co-chair asked me to speak, to me that seemed to be much easier because I had been working on this theme of farmers' income from last 1 year after the Prime Minister expressed his desire in February 2016. Related the theme which was communicated to me a bit differently. And as Shekhar said, that this title is somewhat provocative, and in fact I found it quite provocative. So I will take 5-7 minutes to speak on this topic the way I understand it, and maybe little bit reference to theory that how these two things are related, and then I will come to my pet theme of this farmer income and related issue. So first of all, I feel that if we have to say something about association between agriculture growth and farmers' welfare, we need to have some clear idea about how we measure or how we look at farmers' welfare. What are those indicators which we can use to see what is happening to welfare of the farmers and compare it with the numbers on agriculture growth. So you know that theory tells us that you use a demand and supply framework, then see that when the supply curve is shifting, how it is affecting the producer's welfare, whether there is a producer surplus get increased, decreased. So all that, this textbook kind of thing that one would say depend on elasticity of demand in a static sense, and in a dynamic sense one need to look at both what is shift in supply, what is shift in demand, and like that. I feel that framework is quite complicated. It is not simple. So I just feel that we can use farmers' income and fluctuation in farmer income as two important indicators of farmers' well-being. Though it is simplistic, but I think in operational terms that seems to me a better practical approach rather than talking about if price elasticity or demand is like this, in which range you are, all those kind of things, and that is a bit complicated. And also, even if we use that framework, you will just find that what happens to producers' welfare or producer surplus is not determined by growth or shift in supply alone. It will always critically depend upon how demand curve is shifting. So to just establish a relationship between producer surplus or farmers' well-being in agriculture growth without looking at what is happening to demand side, how demand is shifting, because that is what will determine price. And we use price as a reference for measuring change in producer surplus and like that. So again, so you will find that sometimes there can be much different change in producer's welfare than what emerges from changes in supply, depending upon how the demand kind of thing is shifting. But as I mentioned that I would like to use this simple things that what happens to level of farmers' income when agriculture growth is taking place, and what happens to fluctuation in agriculture income as an indicator of welfare of the farmers. And there again, as Professor Sen mentioned, that it becomes important who you consider as farmers. Do you treat agriculture labor also as a farmer, as recommended by Dr. Swaminathan committee report, National Commission on Farmer, that agriculture labor is also farmer, fisherman is also farmer, carpenter is also farmer. So that is one kind of thing. But my own understanding is that the main purpose of talking about farmers' welfare, well-being, what is at the back of head when we talk about farmers' welfare is what is happening to cultivators. The farmer proper, not that you expand the definition to include cultivators. And this also becomes important because if you look at the trend in the maize mill, And if you look at the trend in the farmer's income, then you will just find that the gross value added doesn't get distributed between cultivator and laborer in the same proportion. It's not fixed. And it is also not showing a particular trend. So sometimes it increases in some phase, share of base, in other phase you just find that it undergoes change. So also there are some, I find that the interest of farmer and interest of cultivators, often you will find some conflict in many respects. So I just feel that I understand by farmers' well-being means that we are talking about well-being of the cultivators. So in relation to that, I will first make some observation about agriculture growth and farmer benefit, and talk about farmers' income. The relationship between farmer well-being and agriculture growth, to my mind, is two-way. It is not that agriculture growth affects farmers' well-being, and I feel that farmer well-being also affects agriculture growth. If farmers' well-being is improving, he has more resources to put in farming, he has more incentive to put resources, he go for better irrigation, improvement in soil, and things like that. So one first observation I would like to make is, when we worry about will the twain meet, that the relationship between the two is between these two is two-way. It is not one-way. The second observation I would like to make is that generally this relationship is positive. So that put somewhat contradiction to the title, that will the twain meet, as if they cannot meet. So generally you will find that this relationship is positive, but effect of growth in agriculture income on farmers' welfare is much larger than what will be the effect of improvement in farmers' income or farmer welfare on agriculture growth. But relationship is two-way, and I understand that it is generally positive, but there can be divergence. Divergence, not that two are moving in opposite direction, that one is moving at this rate, another is moving at this rate, one is rising at 3%, another is rising at 5%. So there, that divergence is possible, but I do not see that when agriculture growth is happening, generally, unless there are other things that they happen in a particular way, that it can change. The second observation I would like to make is that what are those factors which can affect this relationship. In fact, if we consider farmer income as an indicator of welfare, then the relationship between farmer income and growth of output is somewhat arithmetic kind. That quantity of output multiplied by price minus cost of input and base bill. So that is what is farmer's income. So this relationship is something like arithmetic, but it depends upon other factors. It depends upon a couple of other factors. The most important factor to my mind is that when output is growing, how prices are changing, how terms of trade for agriculture are changing. It is possible that when growth is good, when terms of trade are not rising, they are declining. But if rate of decline in terms of trade is lower than what's the rate of the growth in output, so you will find that the net effect of that growth on farmer income will turn out to be positive. So it is only in some circumstances that you find that because of high growth rate in agriculture, the prices are depressed, our prices go, the rate of change in prices is negative and much higher than what is the growth rate in output, that you may come out that the income of the farmers are growing, or rather it may fall when there is growth rate in output. Now the next question is that in the case of India, does it happen like that? That when output growth is happening, or when output is growing at a particular rate, the farmer income has not grown at that rate. If you look at the empirical evidence, in fact we related it when Professor Sen was there in the planning commission preparing for 12th plan, you will be surprised that in the case of India you just find that terms of trade in agriculture and growth rate of output generally moved in same direction. It looks strange, but you look at the data that the period in which agriculture growth rate accelerated, in those periods you just find that terms of trade for agriculture was also improving. So whether it is terms of trade which was guiding growth rate or whatever, but you just find that it happened like that. Like if I have to take recent example, during 2005 to 12, the growth rate of agriculture sector increased from less than 2% in the 10 years before 2005 to close to 4%, and in the same period there was a big increase in the terms of trade for agriculture. And as a result, I constructed a series on farmers' income. You just find that this is the period when unprecedented growth rate in farmer income happened. Output increased, terms of trade improved, large number of farmers shifted from agriculture to non-agriculture. And after 12, you just find that the growth rate of agriculture dropped to less than 1%, and you just find that agriculture prices are also not rising. So to just based on theory to conclude that if agriculture growth is high because of inelastic nature of demand for agriculture produce, prices will fall too much, and therefore to say that our DGICR used to say more production, more loss, less production, less loss, that kind of thing does not hold in reality. The reason for it could be that prices are not affected only by growth rate output. There are many, many other factors which affect prices of agriculture produce, which is a strong determinant of farmers' well-being and of income of the farmers. And one factor could be, again I said when I talked about producer surplus, that how demand is shifting. So if the demand is shifting at a much higher rate, it can utilize the effect of increase in output, adverse effect of increase in output on prices. And I again looked at growth rate in the theory series, growth rate in output, growth rate in value added, and growth rate in farmer income. And I was surprised that in the between 93.4 and 2015-16, the growth rate in output in nominal terms was about 10.3%, and growth rate in farmer income in nominal prices was 10.6%. Only slightly higher growth rate, not lower growth rate than what was growth rate in output. The second factor which shaped this relationship is the kind of technology. Technology is the interface between growth rate and efficiency and how the costs are changing. So I would say that the second factor which will shape this relationship, whether the twain meet or how they behave, is what kind of technology is there, whether it is resulting in reduction in average cost, whether it is helping in maintaining marginal cost and average cost remaining constant. So you will find that in that kind of situation, that same increase in output may lead to same increase in income of the farmer. So second is that technology, that how technology is affecting this input-output relationship and cost. And third factor, as I said, that I treat farmer as cultivator, not at agriculture laborers. So what happened to base bill? And in the process, you know that over time, because of much lower productivity in agriculture sector, so laborers used to move to other sectors. So real wage rate in agriculture tend to rise, and in that process, capital labor substitution takes place. So whether the capital is more costly than labor, that is another factor which will determine what happens to growth income of the farmer when this output growth is taking place. I will not spend much time. There are another 2-3 points because the less time will be left to speak on this farmer income and issues related to that. So I will just add only one thing here, that this relationship between growth rate and output and farmer well-being is also shaped by what kind of policies a country is following. That policies can, you will just find that that we all know that in the case of cereals, if there is a big, like this year we are seeing increase in production of pulses, and pulses prices have been depressed considerably compared to last year. In some of the states they are just either 2/3 or in some cases even half. So in this kind of situation, you will just find that growth rate in output is resulting in decline in farmer income. So this is how role of policies, that if this kind of thing is to happen, how policy should intervene to bring stability into the system. The way we brought in rice and wheat, same thing now getting extended to pulses. So that is another factor that which will shape this relationship between growth rate and well-being of the farmer. Now coming to the question posed by Professor Sen to me, as I am now playing the role which he used to play very heavily in the planning commission, playing it a bit less heavily. Why this separate emphasis on farmer income? Why we need to put separate emphasis on farmer income? I will say that it is not because growth rate in output and growth rate in farmer income are diverging. It is because the growth rate in output is not found to be adequate to bring big change in the income of the farmers. Like we did some calculation, I was asked to give a presentation on this to Governing Council of Niti, so I just worked out some number which could fascinate politicians, chief ministers and prime ministers. I just demonstrated that if you leave income of the farmer only to growth rate of the output, then it may take nearly 30 years for income of the farmer to double, whereas income of non-farmer will double in about 10 years period. So you can imagine the kind of disparity that it will create. Already there is a disparity that income of a farmer is 1/3 of what is income of a non-farmer. So if you leave it only to agriculture growth, then you will just find that it will take 30 years. Output growth rate is long run 2.8%, so if income also rises at that rate, it takes roughly 30 years, 28 years or like that for that variable to get developed. Therefore, it is not that farm growth rate and farm income is taught because output growth is not happening. It is being taught because growth rate in output itself is not adequate to bring a decent or reasonable kind of growth rate in income of the farmers. This is the main reason. Then secondly, Professor Sen said that Krishi Pradhan Desh, these days you know all kind of wonderful terms are being coined to impress the audience. So someone just said that Hindustan Krishi Pradhan Desh to raha, lekin Krishik Pradhan nahi raha. So if you want to make it Krishik Pradhan, then you have to pay attention to income. Then you can't be having a Krishik Pradhan Pradesh where 30% or 22% farmer are below poverty line. So that kind of thing. And secondly, I think the disservice we did to what our first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, that everything else can wait but agriculture. But if you look in practice, that after 1991, the initial 5-year, first, second 5-year plan, they were different. They were really attaching importance to agriculture, infrastructure, institution, land reform, green revolution. But you start from 91, which mark complete that different type of economic policy, you just find that we made agriculture only to wait, not other things. Exactly opposite of what Jawaharlal Nehru said, that we did lot of reforms in other sectors and we saw the kind of changes which they brought in the economy. But in case of agriculture, we did not implement reforms. Or even if we brought little bit, it was patchy, it was half-hearted, it was diluted, without any real intent happening there. So this was another reason that in the post-91 India, aspiration of all Indians increased. So aspiration of farmers also increased, but their aspirations were not being met from what was happening in agriculture. Therefore, if we want to meet their aspiration, if we want to address the kind of agrarian distress, if we want to reduce this disparity between what is income of the farmers and what is income of non-farmers, then this special emphasis on farmer income becomes must. Then we just looked at that what could be the possibilities. Some of you might have seen that my policy paper is already on the website, doubling farmer income. We just looked at that, okay, there are 3-4 kind of sources with us. One is increase in productivity, another is sourcing efficiency, and third is moving some of the farmers from farming to non-farm occupations, so that the same cake is to be shared among lesser number of people. So we worked out those kind of things and tried to explore possibilities. There again we looked at that if we moved with business as usual, with little bit acceleration here and there, that productivity increase, which was about 3% in the last 15-20 years, even if it got increased to 4%, and total factor productivity increase, even if it got accelerated, how much increase in farm income will happen? So we did those kinds of calculations, and we just found that if we move on the business as usual, that in the next 7 years or up to year 2022, the increase in income of the farmer just comes 54%. And this is not at constant price. I just say that when we are to talk about income, it doesn't have to be at nominal price, it doesn't have to be at constant price, it has to be in real prices. That price received by farmer relative to whatever deflator you use. So that kind of change comes. So then what is the other major area from where increase in farmer income can come? Then we just worked on that what is the scope to enable farmer to have high price realization, but at the same time this concern of the consumer, concern for inflation, of course, is also there. Now some of you may be knowing that in many of our states we give MSP, we announce MSP, but the price taken by farmer, realized by farmers, is in some cases 20% lower than what is MSP. Last October and November, paddy in state of Uttar Pradesh sold invariably in most of the market. You can go to AgriNet, MarketNet and see those prices at 1100 rupees a kg, whereas MSP was close to 1500 rupees. So one is that once we are announcing MSP, can we ensure that this MSP is realized by farmers, or find some way out that the MSP get paid to the farmer? If we do that, then you just find that in some of the states, particularly in Eastern India, the state way, you find that income of the farmers increase from 20 to 30%. Because if price increase by 10%, the income of the farmer increase by 13%. Because it is gross return minus cost, so the effect get increased by 30%. So that kind of thing, that if we ensure MSP, that alone in many of these states will result in increase in farmers' income by about, depending upon what is the gap, in some cases 30%, in some cases 20%, like that. So that kind of scope is there. The second is that there are all commodities are not covered MSP. Diversification is happening. Fruit, vegetable, they are growing. Their growth rate is 5% compared to less than 3% for say food grain, oilseeds, and those kind of crops. So can we help farmer to realize much better prices? Because we are hearing about farmers are throwing their produce, they are not able to get even 2 rupees a kg for their potato. So can we do something to market enable farmer to get better prices? So then we came out with a comprehensive agenda for this reform in agriculture market. We are preparing Model Contract Farming Act so that direct buying, processing industry, those kind of things happen. And once you start looking at things, you just find that how much important these kind of reforms are. Let me share with you another thing that, and there I will bring this role of food processing in raising income of the farmers. I looked at this using NSSO data of 4, 5, and 11, 12. I just looked at what kind of changes in the rural economy has happened. That data shows that in rural India, industrial output between 5 and 12 increased every year by 20%. Imagine, because a lot of industry moved from urban area to rural area, and because of other reasons. So, industrial output in rural India between 5 and 12, that is the year for which I have latest data, increased by close to 20%. But if you look at the growth rate in employment, it was only 0.67%. Imagine. But then we looked at composition of industry, paper by Dr. Chandrasekhar and others, that is it that all industries are employing the same kind of capital, or their structure is different, some industries are more labor intensive than others? Then we just found that food processing industry, among the broader classification of industry, is much more labor intensive compared to other kind of industry. So if you can see to it that food processing industry grows in rural area, on one hand it ensures that farmer will get better price for their produce. On other hand, it offers jobs, and some of the farmers move to non-farm kind of jobs. So that can be another source for this kind of thing. We also worked out another 2 set of reforms. One is reform in land lease, another is reform in agroforestry. And the reason that if you look at the latest report of NSSO, it just indicates that in Andhra Pradesh, around 59% of the land is under lease cultivation, but it is not recorded. In Odisha, I think it is 30%, Bihar 20%, or it is other way around, and country average 11.6%. So you can imagine that in a state where 50% land is under lease, and the person who is leasing a land, he is not recognized, he is not able to take benefit of credit, he is not able to take benefit of crop insurance and many other things. So he is operating at a suboptimal level. And on the other hand, those who own this land, they are always insecure. They lease out land only for 2 years. So the person who leases land, he is always reluctant to make investment in the land, not even applying farmyard manure, which give return for 3 years. So you just find that if there is a land lease, it will facilitate exit of some people who don't want to do farming. It will enable those who are in the farming to increase the productivity, use other areas, and we are not allowing wood waste industry in rural area, all those forest department kind of things, that if you allow these things, farmer will cut the forest and all those things will happen. So that is another kind of thing which we have explored, and many other fineries you can see in that policy paper we have described. And we have just said that doubling farmer income is challenging, but it is needed and it is doable. For that, we need to follow multi-pronged strategy, increase in production, saving in cost, then this policy support for MSP, market reform, and other kind of reform. The biggest issue in this is that why center is taking this so seriously. The same kind of seriousness is not there among the states. And agricultural production happen in states. So unless the state own that, okay, we have to double this farmer income, and they come on board, you just find that it's very difficult. So that's why participation of the states in all those measures and owning this goal is very, very important. The last issue mentioned by Professor Sen about this income tax on agriculture, which created some sort of storm after we had a press conference in Niti Yoga, and where Professor Vivek Devrai, in some context, gave his views on it. And again, this confusion created because of, again, another confusion. Now, why we contradicted it? The reason was that one is a fact. Whether Niti Aayog in its report said that agriculture income should be taxed or not, and second is desirability, whether we should tax agriculture income or not. So we contradicted this fact that okay, in the Niti Aayog document we did not say that agriculture income should be taxed. We only said that some people are showing their non-agriculture income as agriculture income. This is leading to black money, and this loophole should be plugged. Beyond that, as of now, whether it is desirable or not, I am not going into merit of it. I am talking about the fact of the case. That in our action document, we didn't say that agriculture income should be taxed. Nor did we say it should not be taxed. Okay, that distinction should also be maintained. That we did not say that it should not be taxed. Nor did we say that it should be taxed. The second issue of desirability.
You are learning the tricks of
I can speak a little bit about its desirability, and again, somewhat Sarkari answer would be these tricks I learned from professors. That being a strong leftist minded, how he used to defend certainty. You see, right now, in Niti Aayog or any government, what you do, that there are 10 things which need to be done, but you prioritize that, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our priority right now is how to take farmer out of agrarian distress, how to increase their income. Our priority in Niti Aayog right now is not how to tax them. Thank you.
Thanks, Meenakshi.
When I talked to Shekhar about this topic, he did give me the license to interpret the title in whichever way I chose, and that's going to be reflected in what I say.
Meenakshi, can I just suggest keep yourself to about 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay,
So just cut me on. That's fine.
because it would be nice
Sure.
if the house had about 15 to 20 minutes.
Absolutely. So, what I want to do is to start off with some basic background on production and productivity growth. And for this, I'm relying on a World Bank report that Madhur Gautam and his co-authors put together, which talks precisely about the relative contributions of total factor productivity growth and input growth in achieving the output growth that we've seen in agriculture. And although this ends basically in 2010, 2011, the conclusions are that TFP growth did contribute slightly more than input growth, which is nice, but that the role of input growth was not insubstantial, and most of that input growth was actually coming from irrigation. And as Ramesh mentioned, the composition of agricultural growth has also undergone a dramatic change. We see a much greater share of fruits, vegetables, and other high-value crops in the composition of output growth. The reason I bring this up is that a lot of this productivity growth is actually seen, total factor productivity growth is seen, is much more in the high-value crops than in the traditional crops. And in fact, much of the growth in the traditional crops, which is wheat, rice, cereals, is due to inputs and not due to TFP, according to their report. So with this background on what agriculture is doing, I want to now move to farmers' welfare. And as I said, I do want to interpret this somewhat more generally. And I want to start with the fact that, yes, we have equated farmers' welfare with income. But we need to look not just at increases in incomes, even staying within the metric of income. We also need to look at downside risk to protect farmers against downside risk. So if at a time when productivity growth is increasing and let's say farmer incomes are also increasing, if the variance around that increase in income is also increasing, then that just suggests that there's much more variation, and of particular concern for us would be, from a welfare perspective, would be to look at the downside, to the extent to which there are catastrophic failures in farmer income. So I think it's important to focus, even if you're looking at focusing on income, it's important to look at both the mean as well as the variance in particular with attention to downward risk. So there are of course a number of initiatives, including the Fasal Bima Yojana, etc., with a target of getting about 50% of cropped area under insurance, which are designed precisely for this. But the fact is that the packages of insurance that have been offered, especially with weather-based insurance, have not really been that successful. And I'm not going to get into the technology options of looking at drought-tolerant seeds or submergence tolerant seeds. But I want to use that to segue into looking at questions of irrigation and the competing uses of water for farmer welfare, which I will define in terms of health and nutrition, and its productive use in agriculture. So that's going to be one part of this nexus that I'd like to explore. The second part is welfare for whom. There is a parallel trend going on with respect to labor supply in agriculture, especially by women, where women seem to be withdrawing. There's a consistent trend, not just in India, but perhaps internationally, of women withdrawing from the labor force. And I'm not sure that we've really understood what implications that has had. Are we looking at just households and therefore looking at farm households and incomes going up? Or are we even looking at some intra-household issues that this growth seems to be accompanied with? And finally, I'll move on to what Professor Sen asked me to look at, which is to look at agriculture, nutrition, and looking at nutrition-sensitive agriculture. So that's a sort of brief outline of the kinds of issues that I want to look at. Now, starting with irrigation, especially to an audience at IEG, I need scarcely highlight the sort of seminal contributions by Professor P.D. Dhawan in the 1980s on the role of irrigation both in its productive impact as well as its protective impact. So this goes back to this question of reducing variance. But the irrigation nexus now is a very different kind altogether. First, we're increasingly seeing that water is scarce in many areas, and yet there are areas where there is underutilized potential. But also that there is still a substantial dependence on rainfall and climate variability, whether you measure that in terms of rainfall or you measure that in terms of high temperatures. These climate variability itself is going to introduce a lot more uncertainty in the extent to which irrigation can protect downside risk. There's an interesting paper, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, by Professor Birthel and his colleagues, that talks about precisely this role of irrigation in protecting against downside risk in yields, not in farmer incomes. Our own policy focus has been on more crop per drop. Perhaps that makes a lot of sense. But I think we haven't really grappled with, how many drops then are we looking at? Because I think the world over, the experience has been that if I have access to water, I will change my cropping pattern, and I will typically change my cropping pattern to things that use more water because they tend to be more profitable. So while nobody can argue against a technology focus that looks at a more crop per drop, it's not clear to me that we have actually understood what implications that has for alleviating water scarcity. And this is important precisely because of the trends in diversification that we have seen, which we have all viewed as a positive thing, with increasing contributions to gross value added in agriculture coming from high value crops. But a lot of these are also far more water intensive than the grain crops that are cultivated. So I'm not sure that we have acknowledged these trade-offs or even have a good sense of what these trade-offs are like. I'm watching the clock, so I'll try and be quick. But as far as the welfare aspects of it is concerned, I think it's also very clear that as far as to the extent that you interpret farmer health to mean nutrition and overall health, it's clear that safe drinking water is critical to achieving that objective. And obviously true in urban areas, but since the limit here is only to look at what's happening in rural India in general, it's clear that this is a point of conflict, and that these conflicts are only going to increase, both in terms of the magnitude of water that people can get on a timely basis, especially as it comes time to sowing crops, but also in terms of the safety of that water, to the extent that it is sourced from groundwaters, which in turn may in fact have pesticide residue or worse. So there is a direct impact of irrigation policies on farmer health in this respect. And water is, of course, but one input. There are, of course, other aspects of agricultural growth, including directly on pesticides, that impact that farmer health and nutrition. Again, using health and nutrition as a metric for welfare. The second aspect that I want to deal with is looking at labor force participation rates, which for women at least have come down, and maybe Bina will be able to expand on this a little more. And I don't think that, I've looked at some ILO documents, I don't think we understand fully why that's happening. The positive sides of it are that there's an increase in enrollment of women in formal education, so they're withdrawing from the labor force. So to that extent, it's a positive thing. There are higher farm incomes, as Ramesh mentioned, and so that's also a positive thing. But perhaps this is also because of farm mechanization and outmigration, and it's not clear to me that those are necessarily welfare improving for women farmers. There's also been some evidence to suggest that because of social constraints, there are lack of opportunities for women to work in the non-farm sector. And so this is an area where I think we need far more understanding of what is happening, and before we can talk about the nature of agricultural growth that will lead to improved welfare, at least of our women farmers, where I do include agricultural laborers in my conceptualization of women farmers. So I'll wrap up by talking a little bit about the nutrition part of it, and I'll focus on rural India, so not specifically to cultivators. At the same time, we're seeing people, including academics like myself, have always assumed that this sort of double burden of malnutrition, where you have the problem of overnutrition, obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, is primarily a problem of urban India. And this is not something that rural India really has to grapple with. That's no longer the case. I think the recent data show very clearly that there is a rapid, in fact, the rates of increase in obesity, although the levels are lower in rural India, have been far in excess than what we see in urban India. And from the undernutrition point of view, although all other indicators are very robust and say you can quarrel about the magnitude of improvement, but I don't think we can quarrel with the fact that most other metrics of undernutrition fortunately have improved over time. But there's one important exception to that, and that has to do with anemia, which has remained unchanged, perhaps even gotten worse. And this is happening at a time when there's unambiguous evidence that this is for women, this is for children, this is for adolescents. These are extremely critical age groups, especially when we look at adolescents and children in terms of their long-term effects on cognitive ability, on physical productivity, and so on. I don't see much of a discussion around these issues. The reason I highlight this here is precisely because we're seeing this not just in urban areas, but in rural areas where it's not clear that the public health system is geared up to address this. In fact, the prevalence in rural areas of diabetes, or based on blood sugar readings, I shouldn't call them diabetes, but blood sugar readings and blood sugar and blood pressure readings is going up, and these are happening at much lower levels of socioeconomic development than, let's say, was seen in Europe or in Asia. And the other aspect of this, which is also extremely fascinating, is that there has also been a rapid rise in what we call the intra-household dual burden of malnutrition, where you see mothers typically who are overweight or obese, but you also see that their children, their own children, underweight or stunted. And so if income alone was sort of the constraint, then you shouldn't expect to see this. this kind of inequality within the household. At the same time, as anybody who studied the NSS will tell you, there has been a diet diversification, but a lot of that diet diversification is happening in the direction of sugars and processed fats. The role of processed foods and street foods in our diets is increasing, and again, the point I want to emphasize is that this is not just an urban phenomenon, but you're increasingly seeing it in rural India, and the whole implications of food safety and foodborne diseases and its impact on health is not something that we understand well. I've already crossed my 15 minutes, so I'll just wrap up by saying that there is now a new sort of initiative. I can come back to it. So the nutrition-sensitive agriculture is, I think, much more than a buzzword. Even if you don't necessarily go along with some of Professor Swaminathan's goals of saying that every farm is going to be a Nutri-farm, I think the recognition that we need to think of agriculture as an enabling environment, and again, to recognize that there is a bidirectional pathway between nutrition and agriculture. This is something that was recognized in the 1920s. If you look at some of the old Royal Commission on Agriculture reports, they explicitly recognize that there is a bidirectional relationship. So my submission simply is that although technology-related interventions are perhaps sort of the low-hanging fruit, but if we really want to look at welfare in a more holistic manner, then we need to recognize that there are trade-offs that are intersectoral, even within rural India, and I'm not even thinking about the industrial sector in rural India or the non-farm sector. I'll stop there. I can come back and elaborate on any of these.
Thanks a lot, Meenakshi. Neerja?
So I'll take 10 minutes. Good evening. I'm sitting in a galaxy of wisdom, and I am being a practitioner. I'm just a follower. I'm like a foot soldier. So government comes with a policy, and we have to go and hit the target. So now you see whether they can twine, whether they can meet. So we have to look at it as glass half full. So we have to go and get it. If you look at the agriculture, it is all of us know that it is the largest private sector enterprise where the farmers are doing the business in the vagaries of the weather. If it is so, then there is a reason that it should be made remunerative to them by multi-pronged approach, as Professor Ramesh has said. So the government has already taken whether this policy of doubling the farmers' income is already taken up a shape, and we have to do it. So how do we do it? There are several ways. Like I'm as a practitioner, what I say is from the observations that I have done in the field, and what the farmers, interaction with the farmers, and what they really want. If you look at that way, I worked in the Agriculture Ministry as a director also in the National Food Security Mission, and now I am looking after Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. So everywhere the farmer, what he wants is, aap kuch bhi de do. You give me water, and quality inputs I can have, quality inputs. Ensure the quality, I can buy the inputs. Only thing is, give me the market. Give me the market, give me the price. So this is the thing everywhere the farmer says. So based on that, we need to make the our schemes. So now the production centric, as Professor Abhijit Sen has already said earlier, it used to be production centric. If you ask whether it was not farmer centric in that way, it was certainly at the back of the mind. If there is a growth, there is a farmer welfare. But now it needs to be made into from production centric to farmer centric, or rather farmer income centric. So how do you do it? I think all our schemes, we are in the Agriculture Ministry, it is a state subject, states have to do, but we support them through so many schemes and so many incentives. So farmers, first thing we want to do is, more than incentivizing the farmers, it has to be strengthening the efforts of the farmers by providing, quality inputs through infrastructure building. That is one of the areas where, it requires a lot of development. And the second thing is value addition to the product. How do you do this? There are so many, examples of it, like in national innovation projects, agriculture innovation projects of ICR has come up with very many value addition chains. Those value addition chains, it is both for cereals, pulses, vegetables, everything. There are value addition chains given. So the same formula will not be applicable anywhere. So we may have to come up, each region requires different thing. Like for example, we went to Karnataka. So in the Karnataka and Maharashtra, Karnataka and Telangana area core cereals are there. So how do you do that? Core cereals have to be developed. So how do you do that? Karnataka government is doing, MOUs with the companies like ITC and maybe Britannia, like that, and they are doing the value addition to it. And the scientists of Sorghum Institute, they have come up with very many, value addition machinery which can be utilized with the farmers, and it can be made into maybe pastas, maybe into, rava, everything, and sweets, everything they are made and they are marketing. So you are actually you are creating a farmers, you are facilitating the farmers and the buyers, kind of interaction. So this is one kind of value addition. The other way how you can do, you can strengthen the farmer produce organizations. FPOs are in Maharashtra. FPOs have done their own, apart from APMCs, what they are doing is they are procuring, their capacity is so much strengthened, they are doing the procurement on their own, and then they are also actually doing the marketing on their own. So these are some of the examples which have come up. They are not the islands of excellence, but this says that there are certain things already existing in the system. Maybe it requires a kind of push, or maybe it is upscaling of these things which are required. And then marketing. Once you do this, do the marketing. And so recently the other idea which has come up is a private-public partnership under RKVY. Professor Abhijit Sen sir has told me to focus more on RKVY. So RKVY was originally for the agriculture and allied sector development. So agriculture and allied sector includes sericulture, animal husbandry, everything which comes under the purview of agriculture. So if it is so, as the economists have already said, apart from the agriculture, elite sector also contribute for the welfare of the, increasing the income of the farmers. So adopting integrated farming systems is one of the, could be one of the, way how we can increase the income of the farmers. So that way, sir, now we are, RKVY originally was basically focusing on agriculture growth. Now now we have come up with a new changes in the already existing RKVY system, where we are saying we will strengthen the efforts of the farmers. And second thing is we'll introduce these value addition chains. And then value addition chains means if the state is coming up with any production oriented scheme, then what we tell them is, okay, production, but you need to link it up with the value chain. But for that, states have to work harder. They have to go walk an extra mile. That's because earlier agriculture is, as a department, agriculture does only the production kind of thing. But if you want to go for value addition, marketing, there are several other departments by several other names in the states which work for those. So there need to be a coordination and convergence with those kind of departments if they really want to do a kind of project. And I would like to inform all the audience here that RKVY is the only scheme which can be utilized for that kind of thing in the agriculture ministry. Earlier, every other scheme is very straitjacketed. So it can be, it may not go into several sectors and will be helpful for the increase in income of the overall well-being of the farmers. So saying that, so we are So agriculture department is a nodal department for RKVY in any case, but the money is given to other departments of sericulture and animal husbandry. So now what they have to do when they give the projects, we are insisting, it is not at approved, sir, but next year onwards, we are saying just link it up and then give me the entire picture. The money need not be coming from RKVY. There are other schemes, like it might be EPIDA which is doing its job. It might be horticulture mission. It might be some National Food Security mission. It might be this PMKSY. All these things. But point is, show us a big picture and then put these things in a place so that show us where the RKVY or any other scheme is existing. This way, state can also measure what is the output of their inputs already giving into the field and see whether there is any value addition to the whether there is any income. I am not saying doubling the income, but any income increase or additional income to the farmers. This is one way we are doing it. Second thing is, sir, second change we are making is public-private partnerships, which has come up recently. We have introduced some guidelines for it, and the scheme of Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. As per that, public-private partnerships it might be with the Indian MNCs or the corporates, or with the Indian companies or the MNCs. They have to there is no contract forming rules are not there, but they are going they are taking up MOUs with those people and they are doing it. So there are several good examples under RKVY only. I am happy to inform you that there is one KB company in Maharashtra, Satara district, which is doing with the vegetable farmers of the district. Those farmers, they are growing bindis and pomegranates and baby corns. And this company has undergone with MOU and with the interventions of RKVY and EPIDA also. I am not saying only, I am not taking the credit only with RKVY. But other schemes, what they are doing is they are giving the technology part to the farmers and training to the farmers and getting the quality outputs, and they are actually exporting to the UK markets. That is one of the examples. And with Jain Irrigations, Maharashtra is doing onion value addition thing. So these kind of examples, since policies once made, who has to implement? We give the money or maybe the directions, then states have to do. States people are sitting here. So this way, we ensure that the policy which is made will go to the field. And last thing is entrepreneur development and bringing youth to agriculture. We have seen those examples of this also in the field in Karnataka and Maharashtra and Andhra. And actually I am taking only below Vindhyas because I think it has taken up more in those areas. So where the young people, they have left their IT jobs which might be giving them 30,000-40,000 a month, and they have come back to the streets, to their own places, when they have established these poly houses and shade nets, and they are growing vegetables, and they are saying, yes, for 3 months I am earning ₹1,00,000, which is equal to 30,000 to 35,000 a month. So I am happy with that. I am sitting at my home and doing it. And there are so many people who are inquisitive about coming back to the agriculture. Many of those young generation may not be directly wanting to do the rice cultivation or wheat cultivation, but definitely they want to do the diversification thing. They are very inquisitive. And then the processing also, there are very many people they are interested in this. So bringing youth back to the thing is also one area. Then you have to increase agri-entrepreneurship, which is also we are going to introduce in our schemes. So the entrepreneurship development is another part of it. So with that, what I would like to say is, as we can do I think we need to think positively before discussion part is the economists part, and as a implementers and the soldiers of the scheme, yes, we generally 100% believe in increasing the income, and at least look at from the angle of the farmer. Till now we were looking at production. Maybe we need to look at it. In the process, we may have hurdles, but we will come across and we'll move and we'll come up with new ideas as and when it comes. But we definitely can achieve a farmer-centric approach if you adopt in the states. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be speaking more as an observer rather than as a researcher. And some of my observations actually come from the fact that I do come from a landowning family. And, well, if I were standing for election, I would describe myself as a farming family. Let me first mention just a few suggestions, particularly to Ramesh. First, I think you're quite correct to focus on marketing as a key element in improving farmers' returns. One of the examples that I obviously saw when I came to Gujarat is the impact that the transformation of milk marketing did in terms of the returns from dairy farming. But it was a formidable job. The power at the other end, in terms of the traditional trading community, is very, very strong. I was in government and was involved in a failed experiment to take over the wholesale trade. And we burnt our fingers there. And we knew that the government cannot take on that trading community, and as you know, we had to reverse it. Because I think it is a key, particularly in areas like fruits and vegetables. If you can duplicate what was achieved in milk marketing, remember, we've not taken over everything there. Actually, cooperative marketing is only about 20-25% of the total market in milk in this country, but it has had a huge impact in terms of the returns that farmers can get from agriculture. But that is missing, and doing that is going to be a huge job. So I hope that you look at that aspect of improving farmers' incomes beyond just reforming the APMC, etc., into something which actually links marketing reform and agro-processing into something which radically transforms the relationship between the producer and the consumer, which is what has happened in the case of milk to a very large extent. My second thing that I would urge is that you will be right in looking at farmers' well-being largely in terms of income. But I would also request that you do look a little beyond this, particularly because of very many factors. One of the factors that I would urge the Niti Aayog to focus a bit more when you look at well-being is health. The health and agriculture. Minhas used to say that the biggest single reason that he thought lay behind the tremendous improvement in agricultural productivity in post-independence Punjab was the elimination of malaria. And that's certainly true in the Terai region. It would have been impossible to do what was achieved there without the elimination of malaria. This is a positive part, but there's also the negative part, which is the fact that the gross absence of health services in rural areas poses huge problems for farming families. You go anytime to Safdarjung Hospital and have a look at the number of farming families who are sitting there with patients, catastrophic health illness expenditure. Indrani is sitting there. Catastrophic health expenditure is the biggest single reason for people slipping into poverty. And it has a much greater impact on rural areas than it does in urban areas. And even a casual visit to any government hospital will suggest. So my request is you please look a little more broadly than just income, at least into some other dimensions, which will actually affect the capacity to earn higher incomes, particularly. And I'm glad that Dr. Meenakshi raised some of those dimensions also. The third thing that I would request you to look at is increasingly what I've seen in my village and in a few others is the fact that habitat management in rural areas and agricultural management is getting much more interlinked, particularly when it comes to water issues. One of the things I would urge is, I know that in my village, drainage is the key issue, more than even water supply. And that what they try and control in terms of habitat is a drainage part, and that drainage part cannot be managed unless you're also looking at how water is used in agriculture. So I would again urge a slightly broader view of welfare from that perspective. John, just one final thought. and that's more perhaps related to where I come from, Gujarat, the changing nature of the cultivator-labor relationships. In my part of Gujarat, most people have given up crop production for fruit crops, orchards. And there are many reasons for it, of course. One of the things they could do is because they had capital. Because you really have to have capital because you don't get any returns over the first 5-10 years when you're doing an orchard. But the biggest single reason, certainly in our family, but many others, was the changing nature of labor availability. With the growing integration of the villages with the local towns, virtually no male in the village is now working in agriculture. They all moved out. And part of the reason for shifting to orchard crops was this the changing nature of the labor. And I think this is an aspect which is becoming more acute in many other parts, apart from just prosperous parts like where I come from. So I I have not much to contribute in terms of suggestions, but a request that maybe some of these dimensions may be reflected when you work on this whole notion of connecting agriculture and farmer well-being. Because I think well-being must be looked at slightly more broadly than just in terms of it. I just wanted to add a few words.
Thanks. I think it's time I threw it open to the House. And I think, it can be a freewheeling discussion. It need not be addressed to any particular person. And I think we've got enough time that at least, and it's a small enough audience so that you can develop your own views on what other people have said. I would suggest Beena starts.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So I did have a few points. First is this whole issue of water irrigation, and I think it's linked to health. Meenakshi said that if you increase the supply of water, the farmers then you increase the demand because you change your cropping pattern. But also existing cropping patterns. So what's been happening in Punjab, for instance, is that there's been a huge decline in water tables, as we know. And the last figures I saw, like 2.6 feet per year from the 2000s. And it's now hit arsenic levels. So you have arsenic in Haryana and Punjab, at least in 12 districts, and all over India, it's quite substantial. Several million people are affected. Now, we don't even begin to talk about taxing overdrawing of groundwater. I don't remember that Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, anybody is really talking about that. And it seems to me it's high time that we do talk about taxing. Now, the health implications are for the farmer's own well-being. So you might have short-term agricultural growth, but you overdraw all your groundwater, then your own well-being is going to be affected. And of course, drinking water wells in the neighborhood get affected, so women's ability to get water for drinking also gets affected. So I would like some response that we need to treat groundwater as a public good and not as a private good under the farmers' fields. The second is, Meenakshi touched on it, but the fact is that what you're having is diversifying households. So within a household, as I understand it, you have men moving out of agriculture into non-farm. It could be non-farm in the rural areas, it could be non-farm in the cities, and you have an increasing proportion of women who are left behind. So within the same household, you have women increasingly de facto being responsible, if you have a bit of land, for farming. And so what you're getting is really a feminization of agriculture. And you can see it globally. If you see an upward trend, except for Northern Europe, everywhere you see this feminization of agriculture. And the labor force participation is over time, but we're not looking at it in terms of what proportion in relation to agriculture. It's not, it can be a decline over time, but that's a contentious issue because there are all sorts of factors happening, some you touched on, some relating to actual measurement questions, but I won't go into that. Despite that, what you're seeing is feminization. And the second is that there's greater dependence of women on farming overall. So if you're talking about well-being of farmers, we're talking about new technologies, we're talking about markets, why don't we change the face of the farmer and say, okay, what is it, a woman farmer we're talking about? And I don't seem to hear that really. I mean, M.S. Swaminathan and others have been talking about it a lot. But how much is it being integrated into the planning process? Because I think the way in which you integrate it has to be quite different. Your extension services don't reach, the nature of technology, the question of access to land, all of these questions which we talk about at the household level become really key. And as Manik knows, in the 12th plan, I was heading this working group on disadvantaged farmers, including women, and we had a lot of suggestions and recommendations that the group came up with. And that really brings me to my last point, which is that one of the key elements that we'd emphasized then was what one could call a group approach. And that really means institutional reform. Now, Mr. Desai touched upon Amul and dairy farming, and it was cooperation in marketing. So we see quite a lot of cooperation in marketing globally, especially in dairy. And part of the reason is, of course, milk is such a, it won't last, and individuals can't have cold storages. So vegetable farming, milk production, I think you can have a lot of cooperative in farming. But I feel for two reasons we need to go much beyond that. One is that you have very small farms, but they need not be small in production. And you can have people pooling their land, capital, labor. And you have examples of that. For instance, Kudumshri across Kerala, which covers all of Kerala, is actually a very good example. And I've been researching that, seeing is it more productive than individual farming? And on certain grounds, it actually is. You find that overall production is higher, and on niche crops like banana, they're doing very much better. So why don't we talk more about institutional reform in that context? And in relation to climate change also, we need planning at a very different level than at the farmer's field level. Professor Sen mentioned that. You remember in the plan process itself earlier, there was this idea of going beyond even state boundaries to look at regions. Can we look at planning according to climatic conditions? And there is a lot of cooperation that's possible. Now, there are NGOs like Pradhan who've been trying that to some extent. And Dr. Chand, we'd like to really hear more. Certainly we moved from Planning Commission to Niti Aayog, but the problems have not changed. And what about the recommendations we discussed when Abhijit Sen and you were together in the 12th five-year plan? Could some of those be paid attention to? And so it would be interesting to hear your views on all of that, and Meenakshi's views as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear all the panelists. I'm Surabhi Mittal with Cornell Institute. I think what I interpreted well-being is not just increasing the farmer's income, but also in terms of better health, better nutrition, and also better living conditions, along with better education for the families. So increasing income, usually we see it as a pathway through increased production, increased productivity and yield enhancement. But there's a lot more than that that's happening, and that has been touched by several panelists, along with what Veena has been saying. One of it is that it's not only the price pathway that is there to increase income. Definitely what Ramesh has also said is reducing the cost of production is also important. But also increasing access to diversified food is equally important. The policies have still been cereal-centric, in spite of our new economic survey being saying that we are the victim of our own green revolution and cereal-centric policies, in spite of economists being realizing that MSP on one hand is a price risk for the farmers, for the producers, and PTS is good for the consumers, but it also deterring our production-based, diversifying towards diverse production system. One example I would say is, in spite of pulse prices being very high, in spite of all the government incentives, the pulse production area is still volatile. It goes up, it goes down, because there are many other factors besides just the price that drives pulse production. The risk, biotic and abiotic stresses are very high for the pulse production. So a lot definitely has to be seen at the state level. both at the central level in terms of the policies, the price policies, how to make it more lucrative for the diversified food. Also because it has a merit for a healthy, productive rural households. On the other hand, in spite of what's happening, as Meenakshi is saying, that the NSSO data shows that with the increase in incomes, the people did diversify their consumption basket, but now the recent trends are towards more of the junk food and the fats and the sugar. Probably that has to do a lot with urbanization, consumerization, and advertising. So on the behavioral change, on other factors, what is happening in terms of getting information or education on nutrition or a healthy food. So a nutrition-sensitive agriculture information is that lacking in the rural areas. Everybody know to eat healthy, but still we are not eating healthy. How to get our extension system into this part. So what Beena has also raised is, I think we still need to talk more about getting the extension services and extension education to these farmers to get into a more holistic well-being that we intend to have for the farmers. Thank you.
Okay, anyone? We've just got 5 minutes left, so yeah.
My question is for Professor Ramesh Chand. It's really ironic that we're trying to make farmers better off by providing better prices, and at the same time you have this central bank trying to have monetary policy which focuses on minimizing agricultural inflation and ultra conservative monetary policy. And it looks like two different governments, almost. Shouldn't the Niti Aayog be pointing out that you have to accept agricultural inflation if you want farmers' income to double?
Anyone else?
Yes, I used to say. Yes, we were talking about MSP. And in case of pulses suffer all kinds of risk, price risk, yield risk and all this. And this year our pulse production is very high, especially Kharif pulses. But due to lack of procurement and efficiency in procurement, and though our government wishes to create a buffer stock of 2 million tons, but procurement is so tardy and inadequate that that farmers suffering lot of income losses in that regard. And particularly suppose Arhar, even in yesterday's newspaper I read it is being sold at 39 rupees per quintal while the MSP is 5050. What kind of interventions stop us to procure efficiently so that we can get advanced?
You're an expert in pulses, but I think this issue has come up there. There's just your Ramesh would answer because I'm the only question.
I appreciate both the question as well as observations. First, the answer from, say, Niti Aayog side. Some of these things you will see in our vision document. That there we talk about all those things that we need to address farmer prosperity, we need to address nutrition, and we also need to address, which has not been directly mentioned, sustainability. That is very, very important. We have been sacrificing long term just for the short run gains. So all those things are mentioned elaborately, and accordingly this strategy is also proposed for those kind of things. We have also strongly pleaded for treating fruit and vegetable in the same way in which milk has been treated, because from the bar side you will find it as similar kind of price elasticity of demand, and from supply side also you just find like milk small quantity. So vegetable also, everything doesn't mature in one day. So all those things, and strong case we have built for this, for having those kind of institutional arrangement in case of perishables. I will take a question by Sabyasachi, Dr. Kar. I feel that in order to give better prices to the farmers, it is not necessary that consumer level price should also increase. there is something like efficiency, there is something like competition. You look at the recent experience of Maharashtra, the moment they allowed private market and direct buying, you just found that that the Maharashtra Chief Minister, I admire him, that he was able to take the challenge of all those mandi traders, and he just brought some reform in market, those 3-4 reforms, and as a result of that, you see the impact. The second example, that Karnataka came with ERMS, that Rashtriya Electronic Marketing System. You compare that what kind of increase in farm harvest prices in Karnataka and in the other states. The increase in Karnataka in the price realization by farmers is 13% more than what is in rest of India. So these are kind of things. So I feel that it is not always must that whatever increase in farmer price happen, same has to get transmitted to retail level. There is something like efficiency, value chain. We have been talking about these things since very long, but we have not been implementing. Recently, even the evaluation of Maharashtra is formed by PwC. It is by this private agency. You just see what kind of gains are visible there. So this is possible. Professor Beena Agarwal has also raised an important question that problem has not changed. I believe that problem has not changed, but solution should change. I could not address everything in 15-20 minutes. We have tried to take into account some of the things. And on many of the things you will find jury still out. You see, you are saying feminization is happening, but Meenakshi says women are
There is no contradiction between
no,
them.
yes. No, but she said women are midwife.
Yes.
That's over time.
Yes.
Huh? She said women are midwife, and you have been saying that
That's over
feminization is happening. You see,
No.
and I quote NSSO data. There is a big withdrawal by women from agriculture. Whether you admit it or not, but that is what NSSO data says. And it should happen when economic condition of a family improve. The first thing they do is to withdraw their women from labor and send them girls for school and higher education, all those things. It is happening like this. So on many things we don't have even agreement that how we should proceed further. But let me assure you that we have addressed sustainability very strongly because it's a matter of concern for the long run. Water table, soils, all those things. And this nutrition also, and other kind of marketing changes also. But I admitted that we did not adequately address gender, and we have put our document for comment of people on our site. We will also have the opportunity to revise it, but we will certainly have a fresh look at gender aspect. It is a bit complicated. I will see if I can get input from other experts also. And in case of you see pulses, you cannot address things overnight. This year there is some procurement, so beginning has been made. So for some time in up to December, particularly in case of Arhar, whatever was the capacity, the Arhar procurement has been done. And I also visited farmer in Bidar, in Gulbarga. They were just telling me, if you assure us the prices like you assured it through NAFED procurement center and FCI procurement center, but to talk of self-sufficiency, we can make you export surplus. So it is there. But doing this procurement and all those kind of things in pulses, again, all kind of things are there. And I have also been strongly emphasizing, pleading with the government, rather than procurement, to think of deficiency price payment. Like UP announced procurement of potato at 400 something like that. It will turn out to be so costly. Punjab tried it long back, kind of losses which were incurred there. So we are also suggesting that okay, let us follow other approaches, deficiency price payment or something like that. We have also worked out how much cost it will involve. So those may be the kind of things for future to see that farmer get better prices without consumer required to pay higher prices.
Okay, I think we come to the end of the panel discussion. I really don't have much to add to this, except I think 3 points, and I'll just make them one after the other. The first is, I think, something which Ramesh said. I think as a challenge to say that we want farmers' welfare and give a particular number saying that we'll double the incomes is like a challenge being thrown out to people like Nietzsche and others. I mean, it's essentially saying that this is what we want you to do. And to some extent, I suppose, that instruction, that message is important because it focuses your mind on what the priorities are. However, that's a message. How you translate it into what should be done is something which has to be done by a process. That process can be administrative. You can decide this is what I'm going to do. That process can be more decentralized. That process can be done through the market. That process can be done in various architectures. How you do it is a basic challenge which I think the Niti Aayog should be actually looking at, because translating visions into practice also requires the definition of the architecture through which it all happens. The third point is the following. There are a lot of what we talked today, and it was a very interesting discussion, because finally it focused on it moved from the statement by Ramesh that if we define welfare as income, then it's difficult, but it may be possible, and we certainly should try and do it. And like in all economic discussions, what then happened is that we said, what the hell is welfare? Is it just income? We brought in other aspects to it. And I think there are several aspects where there are loops. As Nitin mentioned, the loop between health and agricultural productivity, but there are, or for that matter, between habitats, that is the use of water in agriculture and the way you look at it. Now, the moment you move to welfare of farmers and you move to these sort of loops where there are lots of things which affect people's welfare and their welfare affects their income, and therefore the definition of what a welfare is and the mechanisms, I think it again requires, and to give just two things, both of which didn't come up today's discussion. The first is, one way, of course, you can increase incomes per farmer is simply reduce the number of farmers. Nobody wants to do that, or nobody says about it, but it's one way in which it does happen. People leave agriculture, the remaining people actually become better off. And it is a process which is happening. And thinking about that process and making it more efficient is one way of doing it. The second is habitats. Where do we live? And in this context, the big issue of this, one of the big issues which we didn't come to is about urbanization and the nature of urbanization. The way people live, I mean, is it rural-urban of the Kalam type? Is it smart cities, which we are talking about now? I mean, and they have a huge amount of impact on the way we think about it. Think about the relationship between agriculture, incomes, welfare, productivity. And on productivity, I think there is a huge question for the country as a whole, which is in the case of this whole controversy about protection of the cow. Is it going to be the case that we will have to provide a massive retirement scheme, that is a huge scheme, to keep cattle something which people can afford to keep at all? I mean, if they cannot actually get rid of them, then they will have to bear the cost. If they have to bear the cost, they might not actually go into that occupation.
So it has been absolutely stimulating. I can't say I don't have many words to thank all the panelists. I can't thank them enough. But as a small token of gratitude, my younger colleagues want to present you all with please, this lab. Professor Ramesh. Professor Ramesh. Thank you all very much.